guys are phenomenal in this phenomenal movie. I geeked out just watching it because it is a true Batman detective story, and I just love your interpretations of the characters that you're portraying. So fantastic, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. So I'd love to start with Paul. Paul, we've never seen a version of the Riddler like this before. And Matt mentioned in previous interviews that he took a lot of inspiration from the Zodiac Killer and a lot of other real life figures like that. Did you have to do any personal research into these real life criminals to prepare for the role yourself?
Yeah, I did, and I learned that I actually had to start doing that reading like in coffee shops during the day because I couldn't keep that stuff by my bed. You know, it was pretty harrowing stuff. But that honestly, I know it was important to Matt. It really only resonated so far for me. I think immediately on behalf of my character, I felt his sense of intent and purpose was so much greater, and that the Riddler in Gotham, it's just that you know. So, and what I loved about the opportunity in Matt's writing and his take on this was how personal we could maybe make this, and how emotional and how psychological. So I think at the end of the day, it was really more about who that person was and where they came from and why they needed that mask, and the nature and nurture and the sort of two sides of trauma that Matt wanted to explore between hero and villain.
Very interesting. It's incredibly fascinating, and that preparation resonated on screen perfectly. So well done. For Jeffrey, I love your Commissioner Gordon. It's very different from what we've seen before. But portraying such a legendary character, and especially seeing a history of portrayals from greats like the other greats like Gary Oldman, did you take a look at some of their roles and see what they did to, kind of mold the version of Commissioner Gordon that you're trying to make, or did you just kind of come out from your own interpretation and other cop stories and other cop movies that you've seen?
Well, I love Gary Oldman as an actor. Had the opportunity to work with him early in my career, but even prior to that, his work in Sid and Nancy just blew my lid when I saw it. In a way that very few other, if any, actors who are kind of my generation did. Just he had a freeness about him, and he went into places and spaces with a kind of depth that no one else was doing at that time. So Gary, Gary's my guy. So I'm really honored to kind of follow him and J.K. Simmons and others in this role. But no, I didn't really look at their performances. I couldn't see how that would make a lot of sense. I did go back into the comics and tried to track Gordon, find who he was, how I might pluck from from that history and bring that to bear. Because at the end of the day, we want to do justice to the series and to these characters in a way that it deserves. In fact, if there was a reference that I kind of looked at really to place myself, it was Eric Adams, who's now mayor of New York City, because I remember him in the 90s around the Abner Louima case and Amadou Diallo case, these intense police brutality cases here in New York City, being the most powerful voice on the side of the New York Police Department that was aligned with the concerns of citizens at the time, and he was very much an outlier. And so I just thought about that type of cop when I was thinking about who Gordon might be in terms of a reference, a contemporary reference, and just ran with that.
Well, it is, like I said, both of you guys brought brilliant performances. You did bring justice to this, and he's a bringer of justice to Gotham, so that's saying something. So I have to ask, this is such a unique version of Alfred, and there's so many things about him that are just very different than what we've seen with Michael Caine or any of the other interpretations. What was the one unique thing that you wanted to highlight most above all of the other qualities with your performance?
Well, I wanted to bring to the fore what Matt had written, really, which was this very complex relationship with he and Bruce, which, you know, rather than being the lieutenant and the caretaker, and that they're perfectly in sync and moving together, these are at odds with each other. You know, you have a Bruce that is damaged and discovering himself, but on a journey that doesn't include Alfred, and he's pushing against Alfred. And that Alfred, you know, is unable to fill the void of a father that has been murdered, and that was his responsibility to protect. So there's a kind of the guilt that he's carrying throughout that, and yet the sort of the desire to continue the legacy, the Wayne legacy, being thrown back in his face by someone who is not interested in that. That complicated nature of the relationship was what I think is special to this version.
It's certainly a more contentious relationship than we've seen, but no less loving, which is very interesting. Being a father yourself, did your experience with your own children kind of inspire the bits of your performance?
Oh, 100%. You can't not be informed by you know, your emotional kind of recall from experiences in your own life. I mean, yes, and I have children who are exactly at that age where they're leaving home and breaking away, and guidance that you give is not necessarily listened to anymore. And so there were lots of things to draw from, for sure.
You know, I gotta also ask, as somebody who worked with Marvel, with phenomenal work on Let There Be Carnage, by the way, as well as, you know, in front of the camera as Claw, and now going into DC, I have to ask, growing up, did you have a particular preference for DC, Marvel, or just both?
Everything. I was just like a sponge, you know. I loved the Batman TV series. I was a huge fan of the original series. Equally, I was a big Spider-Man comic collector. So I mean, and also I love the Monsters universe as well. I painted models of, you know, King Kong and Godzilla, and so it was all that was what I loved.
Man after my own heart. Andy, it was such an honor to speak with you. Thank you so much. Everyone's going to love this movie, and they're going to love you as Alfred. So amazing work, and thank you again.
Oh, thanks a lot. Nice to see you.
Lectures, fanboys, professional artists, and professors. Maybe a nerd who's just like you, talking about the things that you like too. So I invite you to the NOC. In full color, you see me. The hard knock life. Comics, movies, and TV. Yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.